that for the cat. Alright. Hopefully, Kitty will let me do this. Alrighty. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, no, that's good. That's my other one. It's pretty wild having to have so many different views of yourself. Can we just say that out loud? Alright, so what am I wanting to continue on? Let's do it. Hi, Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon, hopefully we'll just walk upstairs for now. And not be over here. So. I am continuing off on naming, because naming is not just labeling. It's a structural act. Every name in a design system or in any system creates a cognitive experience for those, consuming it at that customer level, but also for the people making it and for the people trying to sell it, the people talking about it, the people interested in it. We are, as designers, as UX designers, I think that where the the output-driven goals of the industries all around us that are, utilizing software, which is completely understandable, has hopefully for only a short time drifted away from what I think is real pattern-seeking UX and gotten into, really basic visual UI. And even in terms of naming, we are not just naming buttons, especially if you know design systems well, you know that atomically, everything is going to be built on top of, if you will, that idea of a button. So you're really authoring the system's internal language. And I guess I could go on about enterprise examples, token systems, dev confusions, from a, project-oriented base to a, 4, 5, 6 year long implementation of a design system. And it all comes down to language breakdown. I would say that, so really quickly, even in terms of Coupa, that was an interesting experience. I came from a smaller product ecosystem that had 4 products to being in a, living in another node of information architecture of a product suite. That I'll just, it's been too long, 5 years I think, and so many product changes, but at the time I've got it, say maybe 26 to 7 different types of products that were all interconnected, and some of those products have products, right? So when I took on the design system at Coupa, there really wasn't one. And I give credit, so much credit to the developers there, and developers everywhere, especially in an enterprise world where, in my opinion, they, bore that responsibility of being a UX interaction designer, in a sense that in this industry, especially for many years, it was BA driven, product driven, where it was all about the product vision, and maybe there was a designer there to create a picture of it, but the implementation came down to the dev, and that sounds correct, but when you're talking about interaction, you're talking about getting from here to there, and that does boil down to a drop-down menu or a list, or the way that you might interact with just a simple type of tree menu. But when you're really getting into configurations, the order of operations matters, and So that was really what I saw when I came into Coupa and started to dissect what was going on there in terms of what was holding up the UI at the time. I worked with, gosh, I could just keep thinking about Curtis. Shout out to Curtis because I think he did a great job. So they were just getting off with trying to create some React components, and I did a full audit of the product as much as I could do in a very short amount of time. And I just did like the front facing like core products, and I can see this audit in my head, and I'm like, oh, I'll just pull the IA of, these core products, and maybe it's like, first 3 levels, and I think I ended up with, over 100, different types of pages to inspect, and they were trying to refine the React library, the components, which, is understandable. But when I audited the product, I found, gosh, over 400 colors in use. I found over 80, I think it was 88 pieces of typography or different implementations of typography, and I think all of them like in a span. So if you know, that's not ideal for accessibility and screen readers. This was many years ago now, and so since then that has become even more relevant and important. And again, it all comes down to naming. And at that time, in terms of what they were trying to scale down to, was the availability of, what would that be, like nine neutral colors. I think roughly, 9 to 12. No, it was less than that. I think 8, colors for the UI. Again, I found a lot of different, not only different color and tones, but tints and tones of that, or tints and hues of that. I just said everything backwards. Okay. I not only found a bunch of different hues, but a bunch of tints and tones of those hues in use. And so again, just even auditing this and seeing what was being used. When you want to scale a design system or fix something, it's not about just like getting rid of something. As a designer, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter if this means anything or if this is important or if this is duplicate. It's there, or maybe it's off by, maybe this hex value it ends in a 5, and this one is exactly the same, but it ends in a 6. It doesn't matter because that designer, they have it here in this container, and this one is over here in this container, and it does have some sort of meaning somewhere. It held it somewhere at some point in time, even if it was a placeholder. That has meaning in some way that matters for how you want to, make changes and structure and organize. So just to, sum up 5 years of work, I will say that after auditing this and, trying to explain that it's not about, scaling down, it's actually about wondering why all of these things are in use and trying to create something that could accommodate that so that we could eliminate duplicates or boil down to one typeface, or if you want to, a serif and a sans serif, whatever that is, and have different implementations of usage for, your headings and your semantics, but as well as, display usages, etc. And inside components, right? Line height, all of that. You can have all of those things. You can still complement the idea of what was there and still a mess by wondering what those decisions were and then creating a token system that can support that. So ultimately, I found a way to do an MVP that could support what we had in place, replace that current very small set of tokens with something that had a naming and schematic, nested structure that would allow us to scale. And I was able then to just know that by having that in place, now I can actually envision 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15 years of how we can scale this system and make way to not only have these core products on, but bring in what we called like our power apps, bring all of these things in that are essentially functioning on their own type of design system, and at that time, really, really old types of code, right? So it's not just UI that we're talking about. We're talking about integrating all sorts of foundations into something completely new, a React UI. So I will say that when you see something like primary info default then that's going to be the extent of what you want to refer to, or if you have something big, your answer is right in front of you. You don't have enough, or if you don't have a different way to apply that in different ways, then you need to make sure that you carve out time in your resources to either figure out how to scale it or set yourself up in the beginning to always be building in a scalable way. So when you don't know what something means, default info. Okay, I'm sure if you could be theoretically, if somebody was actually watching this, but in my head, I have so many siblings and family. I don't know. There's just somebody always around me. I think in my head, but you know, you could think that you may know how that is applied, but what happens if it gets applied in an incorrect way, or what happens if the application was from somebody who had a different perspective, a different little T-truth, if you will, right? You have to know when and where to ask the questions, how to reverse engineer your way back, and you know when to double check something, and never ever ever make assumptions. So ultimately, let's see, I have notes over here that I am going through. Naming, oh man, naming doesn't even come down to tokens. So I wrote down here like, and I have just really simple examples to be able to like call to, but even in terms of like a page container or something like that, man, having a broken page container, it sounds simple to fix, but when you have an architecture that has 400 some odd pages inside of it, that becomes far more complex to fix. So anyway, not only is it the implementation of that matters, say that you don't have it wrapped as a component, or maybe say that you have you know, just not well written code, maybe you have customization in there, or you know, hard written, you know, values or something like that. Not only is that a problem, but if its foundational naming is not callable, right? If it doesn't make sense, or if it's not nested in the right way, you're not going to be able to connect that thing to this thing, as well as integrate all of this other very complex, you know, all of these complex elements that take to make it work. Naming as trust, I have listed out here. I should be writing this down. I meant to. This is again a new format for me to get used to, and I'm running my own personal ethnographic experiment doing this. So what are we talking about? So where naming has broken things. Let's see. Can we see things? So always look for, right? I always have something extra I want to write. Where places and names I always think of things as name. It's like, okay, is it broken if we call it something else? Great. Fine, let's call it that thing and let's get back to the conversation. Because, again, naming matters in terms of organizing, and then getting into the next part of it that I was trying to get to is naming builds trust. Language builds trust. It is language. You can say it simply. Many of us, I'm sure, have been or met somebody from another culture, other families, other areas of your state, and you're like, whoa, your social norm is different than mine. And that can be interesting, or sometimes it can be, well, in your primal, like, human state, right? When you are experiencing something new, sometimes it can cause you fear, or sometimes it can cause you confusion. And now my head historically is like going back like into mankind. But just think about, yeah, think about your family. You know, think about how we're all like, oh, my family's this or that, and we all have somebody wild in there. Maybe I'm the wild one. I think I probably am. And they're hard to explain to somebody else. Or maybe you know somebody who's really, really wonderful, and maybe they have behavior that other people really don't understand. There's like a discrepancy there. Maybe you're in a relationship with somebody and you know that you love each other, but it's hard to communicate. Over time, that creates a breakdown of maybe I don't understand your intentions, or maybe this isn't right for me. When we're talking about organizations, it's the same thing, right? If I don't trust this process, do I want to engage in it? If we are talking about code, okay, well, if I am a dev, where am I? Can we see things? Okay. We can see things enough. Yeah. I shouldn't even. We're not going to do that. So now we get into naming and language here. Oh gosh, I just thought of one other great example. I am learning Spanish now. I started to go see Brandy Carlisle. She does a festival in Mexico every year. And I've never learned another language except Latin in Catholic school when I was much younger. I had a really wild upbringing, I will say that. Another story for another day. But anyway, I just remember being at this counter and really wanting, I was hungover, and I wanted this like panini sandwich thing, and the inability to be able to communicate and even like pointing at it, it was among things. And I felt bad. I felt really embarrassed for myself. I felt like I had a lot of feelings going on. I felt, as somebody who's been in the service industry or whatever for a long time, I felt bad for them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just felt like an idiot. I felt like I was slowing people down, all of this type of stuff, right? Why am I talking about my feelings in Mexico trying to order a panini sandwich and the ability to do so? Because naming, and because language makes us feel stuff. Language makes us feel stuff. It makes users feel stuff. It makes, again, like I like to use really vast examples because just to show the patterns really quickly, but it makes users feel stuff. It makes you feel stuff in your relationship. It makes you feel stuff in your career, or when you're interacting with your colleagues or your boss. It makes you feel stuff when you're walking down the street and, I don't know, somebody yells at you. I don't know. But it is a language, and it creates trust, or it doesn't. And when you're in an organization, you want trust. When you're trying to sell a product, you want trust. When you're interacting and engaging with users, you want trust. When you're naming code, you want trust. Why? Because you want people to write the code correctly. It's pretty, I don't know. It's easy to boil it down that way. Devs need trust. Because devs are expected to deliver product, and because product doesn't always understand how code works or what something, breaking means, or why something might be slow or unexpected, especially when we're dealing with, legacy code and monoliths and stuff like that. Devs need trust to engage with a design system, to engage with tokens. Because at the end of the day, they gotta get the thing functioning and out. And so, say we're at a company and we are trying to scale a really big design system. Well, even trying to firstly get the product to adopt it, you have to have trust. Because in many different stages, products can adopt it. Okay, cool. But then if devs can't implement it, something is going to fail somewhere along the line. Other people who need trust to engage with it are the designers. If the designers don't trust it, they won't use it correctly. They won't be delivering to devs, right, in a correct way. Then devs devs are going to be trying to engage with the designs and not be able to read and interpret it. And what is that going to do? Need something scary, pink. It's going to break. It's going to break this trust, which is the most, honestly, people don't credit it enough. It's some of the most trust that you, most important trust that you really need, I think, when it comes to product engineering, the dev and the designer. Because designers have a whole process, especially UX designers, that they go through to make something. Okay? And they have a way that they, should and need to be engaging in order to create that product. They can't create good user experiences without that foundation. And then if devs aren't really trusting what they're getting, and again, this isn't anyone's fault, it's just the breakdown of the dynamics. I don't like bad energy. Because I don't think anything, I think when anything breaks or negativity, I think it always kind of comes back to some sort of just miscommunicative node. So anyway, if this starts to happen, and what's going to happen, these boxes are going to become separate and more separate. And then now we have almost two different pockets, right? Maybe devs are now going to go to some form of product and say, hey, this isn't working. Now we're severing what I like to call the trifecta, if you will. Can I draw a trifecta here? It should be even, right? There should be even amount of engagement, even amount of, expertise going in and work, sure, but trust has to be there. Otherwise, you're going to get these severed products that just float farther and farther away from each other. And again, if it doesn't matter in your org, cool. But most people don't want that. And, I know I just drew some circles here, but this directly correlates to not only, again, your process, right? It is the process. If this process isn't working, if something isn't working for me, right? That comes down to the fundamental process. Things are going to break apart. Why is the process not working? Because of, in this instance that I just laid out, naming of UI and tokens and design libraries. Is that really the reason? So if we're talking business, is that why you want your business to fail? And it's quite easy. It's just all about building that trust and opening up the ability to build that. Because things aren't cut and dry. They never have been when it came to code and to software, but when you just start hacking it together, and that's the only thing that matters, which again, it worked until now. So we have to just kind of go with the flow and migrate with the changes that are happening because of the way things work. If we keep trying to make things work the way that they used to, which is, well, just get it out, well, then this will never work. You can't. Because you can't just get out code that works, that is good UX, that is also systemized without good naming, and, essentially trust, right? Now we're getting to the point where these things almost equal each other. This is ultimately why I tiptoe around labels. Even when it came to me setting up my React site, I was having, like I said, I was just trying to ship something out for myself, but essentially, hi, kitty. Gosh, did you know that cats, form their meows specifically to their owner to, basically, murder their emotions when they meow? So for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, my poor kitty. And then I get distracted. So anyway, when I want to name something, or even when I was talking through my website earlier, more fundamental things and lay them out here and just take these 2 hours and something I didn't expect and want to do, then I can actually set myself up to do now like 18 different types of ideas and projects or whatever it is that I have much more easily, because now I have like a reusable component and code and elements that I can do in processes. So let's see, let's get into alignment. I think I already kind of, touched on alignment, because again, now I'm starting to synthesize my point together, which is when you get into information architecture and naming and behaviors and patterns, things start to maybe mirror each other or become the same thing, or maybe haven't you ever realized that, maybe two people are talking about something seemingly different and it's the same thing, or vice versa. It's because if you call it something, it becomes it. And ultimately, I see a pattern where a lot of things equate each other, especially when it comes into organizations, software, and I see code and programming all over the place. So it's, can be boiled down in a simple way. So if it's broken, or if naming doesn't equate trust, it's probably going to break. Naming, when there is trust, it creates, should I erase these things? I'll leave them. I don't know, cute. Where am I? So maybe I'll move this video thing. I think I can. Yes. Alright, cool. So anyway, now we're getting into alignment. I already touched a lot on that. And again, I think, explaining it's going to get a lot shorter. If something's not broken, it's probably named well. If it's named well, it can be laid out in a process that can create trust. When there's trust, there's alignment. And again, I am skewing, I'm blurring, even the context together now, because it's a pattern. And that's why it's easy to explain if you know where it touches. And then code and stuff like that becomes a lot less ambiguous and abstract, and a lot easier to, move around energetically in conversation, and again, in business and in your life, anywhere you want. So anyway, all of these things build on each other. When you have alignment here, what did I write down so that I don't let my instincts take over too much? Structure, state, and behavior. That's great. That's a really great way to kind of cascade this out, because now we can move past the idea of just, trust building and can things work, to fundamentally making them work. So alignment starts to naturally happen because organically, in order for these things to work, there has to be these conversations happening. So you have this, yes, environmental and emotional trust start to happen, but what starts to happen as well is like a technical, so you have your emotional, environmental, alignment, right? But you also start to get your technical alignment then, in terms of all of your processes across the board, okay? So why I say that, and it all comes back to naming, is because if you think about any process, there's a reason waterfall doesn't work. Because nothing in life ever is just simply this, right? Or simply this. It's always some bizarre interconnectivity of nodes, that, if you will, create a happenstance, right? So that's really difficult to predict when you can't identify any of those nodes. So you do start to get technical alignment, and then when you're talking about the software specifically, right, and interactions and user experience, well, you probably have a product, right, some sort of functionality that you're building on top of, and that has the need. This is is essentially an information architecture of something, of a system. Your technical alignment, your alignment here, it comes down to an information architecture, and a technical one that's been defined. And so ultimately, structure, state, behavior. So I have, ultimately have been describing these things. Okay? So, cool. We have trust. We have a structure. We have one that's processing and working in place. We know the state of that structure. We're probably headed in a good trajectory, in a good direction. Okay? Then we get into software. Okay, cool. We have a structure. That's good. Now how do we start to define the state? How do we start to define the behavior? This doesn't become theoretical anymore. And once again, things don't really work this way. The way that tokens work, it's actually in a really similar integrated way. These things aren't in a line. They're bleeding together. Well, in a simple way, maybe they're nested together. What a really wonderful way to segue into talking about the structure of IA, because it is essentially nested. It's all nested together in a specific language that works. That works for an organization, okay? And so structure in terms of IA or design systems, React code, let's just talk moving and React. Okay, so you're going to have the IA of, your server side and your back end, but you need an IA for your UX. You need a UX IA. And that is kind of a newer concept, at least again, what I'm seeing in more of the enterprise land, because UX together needs to define the information architecture, at least with the devs, because that structure and the naming of it affects the current state and behaviors of it and what is available in the long run. And who needs to know what's available in the long run? The designers quite a bit, because when a PM comes to them or anybody else, and says, hey, we want to do a thing, the designers need to be able to know what's available and what it means and how it translates back to the state and behaviors of how the whole ecosystem of the product works together. So again, when you're just talking about like dark, light, primary, like they start to not have meaning over time, just like anything else. So I am going to go ahead and end this here and get to a part 3 where I get more into, or finalize this, and we're going to get into chapters 4, 5, and 6, naming and emotional flow, how I personally name and navigate through naming in my own work, and we all have our own tool belt. This will just be mine, but essentially link that back to why naming is the first thing that you have to do in any information architecture system, in any system that exists. All systems have an information architecture. It's the first thing that you really, really need to do and think about. And then we'll wrap this thing up into that final third part. So, again, I have to figure out how to end these videos in a better way, but I did find some royalty-free music, and I have this cool thing. Look at, I can do all these things at once, and I get excited about this, and I'm the type of person that wants to present. Wait, actually, so I called this compromise. This is how I would really like to be talking all of the time. Here, let's screenshot. Anyway, so yeah, this is me compromised, but anyway, I will go ahead and end this and come back hopefully in 10 minutes or so. So, and I will play some music too. So, see somebody soon. Myself. Let's do this. I like it. Okay, let's go play the music. I'm going to become a professional content maker. Okay.